This is all Grit.
Hosted by Animesh and Tanya.
So, Animesh, we finally get to kick this podcast off.
Yes, this first episode was quite a journey. It's an extensive process, but I'm glad to be finally doing this.
Absolutely. The past few weeks have been quite challenging, and to feel that we need to take full ownership of every little thing around this podcast was daunting to say the least.
Who knew this creative process could take so long? We started this in May, I think, and we finally have broken some ground. Tanya, as they say, ideas are hard, but execution is much harder.
I know, right? And when I was thinking about who could we speak to, who could tell us what the real business side of this emotion looks like, I immediately thought of a brand that I came to know about a couple of years ago. Now, these people took some really bold decisions we could all perhaps draw inspiration from.
Today on the podcast, we have Nischal, a passionate entrepreneur and the co founder of Svenklas, which he started in 2018. With sustainability at the forefront, Svenklas is a design driven lifestyle brand that manufactures aesthetic, durable, and functional backpacks infused with a distinct streak of luxury. However, it is their deep belief in minimalism which sets them apart.
Hey Animesh, hey Nischal,
Hi, Nischal.
Hi guys.
Hi, Tanya.
Hi guys. Thanks
welcome to the podcast.
thanks for having me. And
We're really, really excited to have you, and let's just jump right into it. So you come across as a highly creative person with a passion for creating things that are, meaningful, functional, and sustainable. And now Svenklas, which is a design-driven consumer luxury lifestyle brand, is a company that you co-founded, and it is going to be the center of our conversation today. But before we jump into that, I would like to start by asking you about your association with Y-combinator, because that is something which is really exciting for me, and I think that our listeners could benefit from listening.
I was part of the YC program in 2016 for a project. Obviously, there were a lot of learnings in terms of the friends I made there, in terms of the learnings, how to operate when you're starting a company, how to maintain psychological and emotional balance while you're figuring out things on the go, and also a basic set of principles and ideologies that YC have developed via its presidents and all the partners and the CEO there. It is just a crystallized learning that is available for all the people who join YC. One of the major things that I learned in YC was to always, as a founder, they told us that not to get carried away by titles and just focus on the work at hand, because a lot of times you get carried away by these fancy titles. I think even before starting a company, people they print the business cards and they send it out to their friends and family, which is probably not the best way to go about it. I think first few months, probably first year, should really go into churning, and probably if an idea, churning on that idea, and if you are like started out just working on that relentlessly. That was one of the learnings. Second one, obviously, if you have started out, one of the famous quotes of Paul Graham: "Do things that don't scale," which means that if there are things that you're doing which you probably you probably think that this is not worth my time, or someone else should be doing it, like responding to hundreds of customer queries, or even doing the small operation, making a sales call, or calling the delivery guy, or your vendors, calling your suppliers, or probably getting your first customer onboarded, and acting as a customer experience executive for that first customer. I think a lot of people get into the trap that they believe, okay, I'm now the founder and so and so. This is how most companies get folded up even before they start. The other thing, obviously, which I learned is take a lot of feedback, but also uh, save yourself from groupthink, because a lot of time when you have friends and family, probably mentors around you, they're thinking from a different perspective. And when you think everyone's telling you it's a good, it could be bad, and when everyone's telling you it's bad, it actually could be a good thing for your company, right? So the other important, I would say, a thinking principle which has kind of guided me, and I learned there, is thinking by first principles, which is not assuming things which have already been done as to be the absolute, plus rather than figuring out the fundamentals of a problem that you're looking to innovate on or looking to create a solution or a product. Just go back to the fundamentals, figure out what were the first principal fundamentals that actually led to the first iteration of the product, and how people build upon that. So along the way, in a journey life cycle of any product or service, could be 30, 40, 50 years, 100 years, you see a lot of areas where there has been no innovation for last 5 decades or it's even a century. How do you kind of take a leap of faith there? Is just figuring out the fundamentals and just think from scratch. Just draw your own canvas, think from scratch, and that is how innovation comes about. Because, as I said, the one thing which drives company to success is if you're better than the rest by an order of magnitude, which means that you have to be better than everyone else by a factor of 10 at least, if you're looking to sustain in the long run. Yeah.
So you said that there can be a situation where there's no innovation. Do you think usually in markets where there are monopolies, people get complacent when your company starts doing well and you're the only person who's out there, the only big fish, and suddenly you realize you don't need to put in as much effort as you were putting earlier anymore? Do you think that is where disruption comes in? What is your thought?
You'd probably die of suicide than murder in most scenarios.
Okay.
Yeah, because in most scenarios, people start thinking about a Google or Amazon, but at the end of the day, that's not what's going to kill you, right? That's only going to kill you, let's say, in 7 to 8 years, if you get in the way, or probably they think that you're a competitor. And even as a founder, if you do get in the way, you get out by being filthy rich, because you're going to get acquired. And obviously, if you have a sizable, you're not diluted badly, and you have sizable stake in a company, and you anyways would be spending the rest of life in a luxury yacht, right? So I think that's the trap most people get into, thinking, obviously, like I said, monopolies are bad, they should die. But a lot of people think about disrupting monopolies when they're starting out. Obviously, I think this is a trap I've seen, especially in India, where everyone starting out, they want to build an empire, right? They want to build castles. They want to change the world, all right? I think they get wrongly inspired by few of the anti-role models that we have, like Elon and Steve. I call them anti-role models because then when you think about these people, like they've done so much, then you don't know the background, the story, luck, timing, and then you're trying to kind of emulate them, and just not doing a shit, right? You're just thinking about, okay, you'll build an empire. Your focus is not on the journey, right? That's what your focus is, where you want to be, and that never turns out well. I think at first couple of years, you'll probably be dying of your own missteps than probably via any monopoly, Google, Amazon, or Apple. Yeah.
So
I think I love that thought.
Yeah, it's I think we all resonate on that thought.
Yeah.
Now coming, since you said about focus and empire building, we want to come to the journey of Svenklas, of how you started and what your focus is, and what the company is about. The brand name is a little quirky. I looked at your products as well; even their names are quirky. right? So I think you are meddling with luxury and functionality somewhere. So if you could
Okay.
tell us what it is actually about.
Even before when we started out with Svenklas, I think my perspective personally was still is central to two things. First is how often do you buy things that really gives you joy, right? I mean, that's so rare. uh, how often do you buy material things that, yeah, you somebody loves, and uh, creating a physical product that someone really loves, that is so rare and that is so difficult. That is one central theme to why I started Svenklas with my co-founder. The other thing, what I had in my mind, that what are the set of things that can be done to make the future better. Like, what are the things that you look forward to waking up in the morning? Like, you look forward to the future, making the future better. So we spent 6 months figuring out what materials we should be kind of using in our products, and we kind of settled on two materials, which is organic cotton, which we're sourcing it from a village in Uttarakhand and Madhya Pradesh through an NGO. The second, obviously, we use vegetable tan leather in our products, which is obviously more durable. And obviously, on the leather part, we do get asked a lot of questions, but there is a misconception about leather, that some animals are cut or something like that, but that's not. And animals are not cut for leather. Leather is actually a byproduct of the meat industry. Most of the animals are bred from meat production, and that the byproduct is you get. If you don't utilize it, it's going to anyways end up in landfills and bad for the environment. So as long as meat industry kind of dies, leather won't be stopped. Leather will remain continuing production. That's how we thought about from a material innovation perspective. About the name, we obviously so our design philosophy is, as you must have seen our products, it's minimalism. It's actually more refined version of that, which is Scandinavian minimalism, which is a design movement which got inspired, which started uh, in the Nordic region. This movement was inspired by minimalism. So says that a product or an art should not relate to some. It should not symbolize anything, basically, right? So a lot of people, they look at my tattoo and they ask me, "What does it mean?" So I tell them it means nothing. It just means nothing, and they're so shocked to know that how can it not mean nothing. But that is, I mean, you see what you see, it means nothing. It's just a geometric pattern. Why do people always have to make assumptions from an art or a painting that it has to mean something, that it has to represent an idea or a symbolism or some movement in history? It doesn't, right? That's the basic. So that's same with the product. I mean, we just wanted to make sure we make products which are unique, which are minimal, and then that was probably the toughest part for us to do, because when you're creating products which are minimal, and at the same time you want the user to have the same level of functionality, that's a design philosophy and a principle. Yeah, and the whole story.
I think that's really interesting. In fact, I was thinking of Ayn Rand when you were talking, because she talks about design and functionality of things, and how it is just supposed to serve a function. Like, design can be aesthetic, but it should be functional. And I mean, the whole theory of objectivism is debatable, but then this is something that I resonate with, and I think that Sven class is definitely based on that principle. So we would actually now like to go deep into the business of things and make things slightly more meatier. So, if you could talk about the supply chain of Svenklas from procurement to production, and if you could just briefly walk us through how do you procure your materials, how do you then go producing the bags that you make?
Yeah, so we source our raw materials from Europe, and South America. I mean, it's pretty interesting because the first time we went to a manufacturer and we told him that we want to use these materials and not the usual materials. So the first response, so he told us that have you gone insane, because that was 3x costlier than the normal price. But you see now, you will hardly hear that tone from people, because sustainability has become a hot thing right now. It has become imperative for brands to kind of greenwash people ki we are sustainable, buy from us. But at the end of the day, people don't buy sustainable products, right? They buy great products that are made sustainably. That's the greenwashing that we're seeing right now. And we wanted to stay away from it. That's why we focused on you can say material innovation of sorts, where we source some materials, raw hides from Europe and South America. Most of the material that we source are from certified suppliers. All the raw hides, then we import it into India, and the tanning process, which kind of gives the texture to the leather, we do it here. All of our products are vegetable tanned in India, which means, so generally there are two ways you can tan a leather hide, either through chemical tanning or vegetable tanning. So again, slightly costlier option for us, but we went through that because we knew that what means for us in the long run. In vegetable tanning, we use woods, barks, leaves of the trees, while tanning our material. This was the material part, where all the supply chain is interlinked with our suppliers. These materials get imported into a manufacturing unit. We work currently with 2 manufacturing units in Gurgaon. Once this is done, parallelly with the material, we also parallelly what exercise we do is obviously prototyping on design. Generally, it takes around 3 to 4 months from an ideation of a product or a new product category to the actual product getting into the hand of the customer. So first we'd make a brief sketch. We would see how it looks. We would convert into a 3D render. Then that first sample is made. And then after that sample is made, it goes through iterations. It will go through 3 to 4 iterations at least, so that the size, the structure, the design, the functional elements are as per the brand, as per our requirements. And once that is finalized, we kind of create a final sample where we say, okay, this is the final product that will be now put into final production. Whole process from ideation, from sketching, from the sketch to the ideation to sketch and the final product ready to be sold to the customer, it generally takes around 3 to 4 months. That's a normal cycle you see in manufacturing. Yeah.
So moving on with Svenklas, here we know how a bag is manufactured, how the material is procured, how the bag is manufactured in the factory. And now what we want you to tell us is how it reaches the consumers. Like, what channels do you follow? Are you thinking of an omni-channel way to go when you are trying to reach the consumers, or are you focused on e-commerce?
So yeah, 90% of our sales are online and through our own channel, which is through our own website. It's hardly 5%, 5 to 10% is driven by marketplaces like Myntra or Amazon. And obviously, I think with time to come, we would want that portion to translate into our own e-commerce channel. Brick and mortar and omni-channel is not something we are looking at, because I think that makes it a little capital intensive. What's sustainable and for us to be capital efficient and sustainable for next 3 to 4 years, I think it's important to have a light asset model where you're not incurring cost more than what you're incurring than the material cost and the warehousing cost. I think having an omni-channel or a brick and mortar, obviously you'll have to figure out that are you able to generate enough revenues per retail square feet more than what the cost of that area which you have occupied? I think that's not quite, we are not there yet in terms of thinking whether we should be doing that. Obviously, we're bootstrapped as well. Obviously, when you have when you're raising funds from outside and you have, because this is a capital intensive venture that you take, that you need to kind of see. I mean, it's very capital intensive to start your own brick and mortar. I think till the time we're bootstrapped, we would 100% be an online e-commerce and 100% D2C, direct to consumer, where we want to make sure that the most of the products, the purchase which happens for our customers, it happens through a website. Again, there is a trade-off where a lot of people would tell you that sell on marketplaces and sell on other third-party channels, but that's a trade-off I think you have to take as a brand. But if you really, because this trend of direct to consumer selling where you're not having any middleman, this trend came from US, was prevalent there 10 years ago. Warby Parker and Bonobos, these were the two companies which kind of revolutionized this idea of having no middlemen in an e-commerce business, because anyways an e-commerce business is very capital intensive. I mean, there are costs and expenses at every part of your supply chain. Every part you'd see in your income statement, just expenses would keep eating into your revenue and very thin margins.
Nischal, a follow-up to that question, I wanted to know if you face any difficulties while as a seller on websites like Myntra or Amazon or Flipkart. Do you get strong-armed on margins by these people, or is there any other difficulty which you face?
Yeah, I mean, for us, we're only there on these marketplaces just as a branding activity. That because we don't inspire to do a lot of sales through these marketplaces. Obviously, what you'd essentially want, that all of your users, that ecosystem, that should be tightly integrated into your own channel, your own website, your own brand, where whenever customer purchases product through your website, you're able to send out a communication about the stuff you're doing. So I give you an example. Like, we planted tree in Aurangabad, in Sangli area in Maharashtra, and every product sold. So it's very important for us to communicate to the customer that look, we have planted a tree on that product purchase. Also, it's very important to send out a customer communication to the customer how to take care of your product. It again becomes important for us to communicate to the customer that you bought a item, you can probably should go for this one, like let's say in 6 months time or in a year's time. So you don't get that opportunity, you'll never get that opportunity with all the marketplaces. So I think there's a trade-off that a lot of people struggle with. Yeah,
absolutely, I think that makes perfect sense. And I think that you touched upon the capital in the last thing that we were talking about, and I think that you mentioned that how capital intensive it can be, from the procurement to the production to the distribution of the products. Now, I think that this topic especially is the most materialistic when you talk about business which has, which is born out of something that somebody was passionate about. But also, this is something that is really, really important for business to take off. So how have you managed your capital finances so far? And what is the future in that regard?
Yeah, so I mean, I actually took a huge risk. I utilized all my savings, just kept 1 year of capital worth money so that I could survive for a year and see it from there. This is how we started. We kept some money for marketing, but all of that rest money went into creating a first batch of products, because obviously in manufacturing there is a concept of MOQ, which is a minimum order quantity, right? You can't just go to any manufacturer and say, hey, create 10 products for me or create 50 products for me. So the initial investment for a product like what we are doing, all high value ticket items, and again not knowing how will that be perceived in the market because something was new, like very few companies that were kind of involved. Even globally, there are very few companies that were kind of innovating with materials. So that was a huge risk we took with our savings. I just kept, so also we had an option to take money from outside, but again, we thought of, so still our thought processes that we want this to go on for more than a decade and probably even more than that. And once you take money from outside, from an institutional fund or a venture fund, again they have their own cycles, like you have product cycles where they have to make an exit, and at the end of the day they want the return back, right? They want the money back then. So that was a conscious decision that we would be bootstrapping for the first 2 years, and probably that was kind of a hard decision that we're not looking. We'd first scale this to an extent that we had be a position where we can actually have the leverage when we're going out asking for money, because obviously leverage is a very important factor as you are scaling, because I mean because it's important to for wealth creation and to have to have people around you that actually make something meaningful. You need to partner with people that actually know what you're doing. It's very easy for people. I mean, there is a lot of capital in India, by the way. And there is huge capital in India flowing from everywhere, from China, US to Singapore and Japan. I mean, there is no dearth of capital, and there is no dearth of smart people doing smart stuff. It's just that you need to find the right advisor, mentor, whatever you call it, that really aligns with what you're doing. And what we thought that probably initially no one would really get us, and no one actually did get us. And that was also one of the points where we thought probably we're doing the right thing, because everyone is kind of not really paying us attention to launching with just 3 products. So yeah, that is how we started, completely bootstrapped. We kept some money for our sustenance for 1 year, and we kept some money aside for a marketing. Yeah, luckily it just went well.
Now, you were in the US, you were with Y-Combinator. Y-Combinator has this huge network of alums. You could have worked with any one of them or done anything anywhere outside India. Your inspiration is also Nordic. Now, what makes India special for you, that you operate from India? Even when you're supplying outside India, you do it from your centers over here.
Yeah.
So why did you choose India as the base of operations?
I mean, India is it's a land of seekers. We're like, I mean, we're always questioning things. Even when we're fighting, we're questioning things. Unlike the West, where obviously people are mostly logical, they think through the heads more than they think through the hearts. So that was one of the factors. You can say that intuition was always there to do something in India, and also the fact that you see in US and Europe, all these fashion companies, the market is already saturated. People don't want to see another Gucci. They don't want to see another Prada, right? I mean, they don't want another Louis Vuitton. They don't want to see another New York Fashion Week. They don't want to see an LA Fashion Week. They already have that, right? Almost 95% of the consumers are digitally linked with each other. The internet penetration is very high, more than 95%. That's what kind of attracted to India, because you see there are almost 500 plus million internet users in India. And you see the remaining half presents a great opportunity. And one another important, in fact, it's a shocking fact that out of these 500 million plus internet users, only a handful of them, 60 to 70 million, are driving 40 to 50% of all consumption in India. I mean, that's a startling figure. The reason is related to the increase in household incomes. The spending in any country is related to increase in household incomes and per capita income, and you don't have that in India as of now. But the best part about it is it's increasing every year. We're seeing a significant growth in per capita income and household income spending. And once that would reach a certain level, you would see that now that the majority of the consumption is being driven by those 100 million users. Imagine the scale and the size of the opportunity when those remaining 400 million joined the consumption kind of wheel. And what about the remaining 500 million that just got logged onto the internet, and what they start consuming? I mean, you can just imagine the scale of what India is capable of doing. You can just imagine it, where India will be in the next 10 to 15 years. Probably that's why you see most of the companies now investing heavily, the Google, Facebook, investing in the big companies, all the Chinese investors investing so much capital into Indian startup. From a business perspective, if you ask me why we chose India as to like a standard, obviously we will be starting to increase our business in US and other territories. But why we thought India would be our operating hub, it's obviously this pattern of statistics that we saw, which, I mean, a lot of people overlook this, right? It's a pretty simple stat, right? A lot of people overlook this stat, that how the consumption patterns in India are going to evolve over the next years. I think that's where you see a lot of value will come out of all the companies that would survive the current situation. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I understand what you said about the market of India being a booming market, and it's only going to like grow from here. And like you said, all the big names right now, Googles and Amazons, are investing in India because of that reason. But I'm pretty sure that the journey has not been very easy for you, because as I assume, the journey to start a new company wouldn't be easy for anybody. So what would you say is the hardest decision that you've had to take with respect to the journey that you've had with Svenklas so far?
I think for us, the hardest decision for us is not to raise capital from outside and deciding to grow organically. That was one of the hardest decisions. It still is, where we're finding our way to just keep going on, maintain our margins while also making sure that we grow sustainably, and keeping bootstrapped for like next few years. Still, I think whatever interest we get from people outside, it's pretty hard to tell them to wait and tell them to we need more time to evaluate things or to structure things. So anyways, the perfect time would never come for us. We'd always be dousing fires on our end all the time, and so there is never a perfect moment where you can tell it's perfect moment for you. There is always an urge, there is always that kind of thing where you're asking yourself, okay, whether you should kind of take the leap of faith. But then there is also at the back of your mind, that for you to have that long-term approach, and where you actually want to take this, for how long you really want this to survive, and how long you want this people to know about it, than just get acquired or just burning through all the cash and not having enough stake in your company. That's a trade-off that you have to make. And probably the hardest decision through our journey with Svenklas is to just figuring out that at what's the right point of time that we would include people from outside. Also, one of the hardest part is to know what kind of people that you want with you, because whenever you hiring somebody or having somebody who have not met before into your organization. And that's, I think, the first few employees are incredibly, those will be the make or break for your organization, because that will kind of, those are the people that will drive your vision, that will drive your company. So that is also one of the problem that we're facing, is to have those first set of people, that going to be the, found kind of, in a way, kind of, the first people that will drive us to further success. So around having people on board from a from a perspective of capital, and from a perspective of human resource, I think those are the biggest challenges that I think we keep facing it like every day.
So, Nischal, it has been amazing talking to you. You have given us insight into YC, how a startup works, how sustainable fashion should be, and how e-commerce affects a startup like yours. Now, we are in the last segment where I want to ask about the vision you have for Svenklas in the next 5 to 10 years, and something for our viewers, something for our listeners, something exciting which you have been working on. If you could just take the stage for 2 minutes, share your vision, and share something exciting which you have been working for.
Yeah. Uh, uh, Vision. So what we're trying to do is create a significant difference with how people view sustainability in our country. What kind of motivates us is the opportunity that we have to inspire consumers and even companies in the fashion world to start taking efforts to improve the supply chain, efforts on climate change, working condition, transition to renewable and solar energy at the manufacturing units currently, and the working condition, maintaining the wage, labor hours, and the working environment, and the use of natural materials. Uh, these are the things that we hope we could actually do useful things around these things. And probably if people, so everything is open source that we have, we feel happy when someone kind of copies us, not the design, but obviously our methodologies and the processes that we have. And yeah, I think our future, obviously our goal is to transition to 100% clean energy in our manufacturing units. Our goal is to create a product which is totally biodegradable. Also, we're looking to innovate with other materials like merino wool, econile, hemp, tencel, and in our future product categories. Currently, that what we are working on, it's a kind of a stealth project. So this, we're calling it. I won't. It's still stealth. We haven't named it.
It's a safe
But
space. It's a safe space.
yeah,
No secret.
so we are working on a project where you can calculate your carbon footprint by answering a few questions about your lifestyle. Everyone on this span, in the lifespan, they emit a certain number of, they emit a certain metric ton of carbon, but they're not able to do anything to actually negate that. You're just putting carbon into the atmosphere, but because you don't know how you can actually negate it. You can't plant a tree, right? There's hardly any space. I mean, how will you how will you negate how will you negate this? How will you negate your footprint? So we are working on a project where people would be able to actually calculate their carbon footprint by just scrolling through a few very basic questions about your lifestyle. This tool will then provide the user with a carbon offsetting price tag, where they can pay some amount to offset what they emit. So carbon offset is the amount that you need to pay to actually negate your footprint to zero. If you're burning, let's say, 10 metric tons of CO2 every week, probably you need to pay $100 to an NGO or an organization that is working for some environmental project, right? So the amount which we will be taking, that would be donated directly to our partners, would be engaged in environment protection works like a tree plantation program or distribution of clean cooking fuel. Yeah, so that's I mean, a lot. I mean, again, this one is probably we are getting more negative feedback than even when we started Svenklas. But again, you have to start at some point and probably also kind of inspire other people to kind of follow you. Yeah.
I think as we see the trend, the more negative feedbacks you get on your ventures, the more successful they become. So it is good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's see.
Good luck is on your side then. I think that it's been lovely talking to you, and I think both Animesh and I have definitely come out slightly more knowledgeable after this conversation. More educated, yes. And thank you so much for spending your slight amount of your Sunday with us.